I want to welcome you to this webinar, and we are going to talk about the first year law students exam, how to prepare for it, how to be successful, what is it even, like what does it test, all of that stuff today. I'm going to try to give a fairly quick sort of summary in the beginning and then open it up for questions if you have questions. Before we jump into all that, though, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Jennifer Carr, and I am licensed in California and in Nevada. And I have been doing bar prep work at various law schools and all that for, I was thinking about this the other day, and it's been more than 15 years now. So there you go. And the first year law students exam is not something I had a ton of experience with until about 7 years ago. So that particular piece I started maybe about 7 years ago. And one of the things we'll talk about today is the way that the first year law students exam is similar to some of the exams that you'll see similar to the California bar itself, and the way that you can prepare overlaps. Okay. So let me show you my Power or Keynote here. Okay. Let me start there. So you may just about I want to talk a little bit about the first year law students. Actually, let me make that look better. There we go. I want to talk a little bit about the first year law students exam and a little bit about what it's like and what is tested on it and all that. You may also hear this so-called baby bar. And I actually really like that language because I think it helps to emphasize the ways that the first year law students exam is similar to the baby bar. So what do you need to know? Well, whoops, you need to make this thing stop doing that. Okay, there we go. So the first thing to know about it is that it's written by the California Board of Bar Examiners. So this is written by the same people who write the big bar. If we want to call this the baby bar, they're the same folks who write the big bar exam. And it really is meant to be a preview of what you'll see on the so-called big bar exam. It's written by the California Board of Bar Examiners. Now, some of you may know that the multiple choice portion of the big bar exam is written by the National Conference of Bar Examiners. The National Conference doesn't, help write the multiple choice questions for the California Board. That's written by the California Board, but they use those questions as models. And so the best way to prepare is going to be to use released MBE questions. And so you're going to have, same as the big bar, you've got an hour per essay. So you have 4 hours to do 4 essays. And same as the big bar, you've got 3 hours to do 100 questions. So the big bar is going to have a day, of essays and then a day of multiple choice questions. Timing for both bar exams is the same, right? So 100 questions in 3 hours or 4 essays, in 4 hours, same timing and everything. And there's 3 topics that are going to be tested on the California, the baby bar, right? Torts, contracts, and crim law. Now that's a little bit different than the big bar exam, which has, more topics than that. But again, designed to kind of be a preview of what you're likely to see on the actual bar exam. Okay. So why did this come about? Like, why is this here? What does it do? And so it was initially designed to allow students to be sure that they were receiving an adequate education such that they're going to be successful when they take the bar exam later on, right? And the idea was California kind of said, all right, look, folks who are running, California accredited law schools or unaccredited law schools or correspondence schools or whatever. We're gonna allow your students to sit for the bar exam, but too many of your students, California accredited / unaccredited law schools, are not successful on the bar. And we're concerned that, are you doing a good job preparing them? And so before they spend 3 or 4 years in law school, let's have them do the baby bar. And presuming that they can, pass the baby bar, then it makes sense for them to continue with their legal education and receive additional training and classes and all that, and then eventually, hopefully, pass the big bar exam. So that's why it was created. It was created to be almost a consumer protection measure to make sure that students at these schools were receiving an adequate education. It also gives applicants kind of a preview of what to expect on the actual bar exam. So for those of you who haven't really thought about the bar yet, and that would be super normal. Lots of folks don't start thinking about the bar exam during their first year of law school. This is a good way to get a sense of what it would be like. It's also a really good way to get a sense of what works for you in terms of preparing for the bar exam. So you're going to know, hey, I really like making flowcharts, or I'm the person who loves those electronic flashcards, or I need to just write a million questions. And we're going to talk about some different ways to prepare and what I would recommend and all that. But the baby bar allows you to have that experience and to kind of just test it and see what you think. And you can try different programs and kind of see what works for you. Obviously, I'm partial to BarMax. I'm going to talk about what we offer, but it's practice for you in terms of what will work for you for the bar. It's going to make sure that you're receiving the education that you need to be successful, and so on. Now, having said that, I will say that most of the California accredited schools do a good job of making sure their students have the education they need. And most students will pass within what California calls the 5-year minimum pass rate. So they do fine, but it does sometimes take a minute in order for these schools to meet the pass rate. So what we want for you all is to make sure that you're in that group that's actually passing on the first attempt. And so how do we do that? What does that look like? So the first thing to know is, what does it cover? And we mentioned it covers criminal law, and it's going to cover pretty much all of criminal law, right? So from your inchoate, crimes like solicitation and conspiracy to, murder, to theft offenses, and then also the defenses to those crimes. It's going to cover torts, and it's going to cover that whole first year torts class. So your intentional torts, your negligence, strict liability, products liability, defamation, or other privacy torts, and then defenses to all those. And it's going to cover contracts, and it will cover both contracts under the UCC, so contracts for the sale of goods, and contracts under the common law. So the restatement, if you studied the restatement. And it is designed to, again, kind of be this is everything you learned during that first year of law school. And it's a good preview of what you'll see when you take the actual bar exam as well, right? So if you were coming to me and saying to me, Jen, I'm planning on taking the California bar exam, what are topics I need to know? Hey, for crimes, torts, and contracts, this is what you need to know. You need to know, basically that whole first year list of topics. So having covered like what it is, what we didn't talk about though is when it is. And so it is, whoops, there we go. There we go. Nope, see, look at that, why, there we go. Okay, so it is given in the summer and in the fall, and it is remote. So just like the bar exam in October and the bar exam in February was remote. The first year bar exam is also remote. And you can take it, if you fail it the first time, you can always take it again. But again, we want to make sure you're in the group of folks who's going to take it and be successful on the first attempt. So what do you need to do in order to be prepared? And when I work with folks and I say, we talk about what happened, why were you not successful on the first attempt? Couple of things happen. So first, sometimes I get folks who they're studying plenty, they're doing what they need to do, but they're not studying in a way that allows them to effectively convey what they know, right? So most of the time, what you get are folks who are so focused on memorization of the material. They're like, wait, Jen said inchoate crimes, like, do I know inchoate crimes? What are inchoate crimes? And they're going back to like review the material, and they're memorizing. And then they're not taking it to the next level of, okay, how do I put this into practice? What does it look like to demonstrate that I know this material in a way that the bar examiners will reward? And what I will say as I've worked with folks is most of your law schools are actually requiring you to do this, right? So your law schools that ask you to do midterms or do multiple choice exams, they are working with you on developing those skills. So first group is going to be folks who prepare, but they're just really not preparing the right way. They're focusing on memorizing. Rarely I will get folks who are, again, focusing maybe not on exactly what I would want them to, but instead of focusing on the memorization piece, they kind of go into it with a, look, I've always been pretty good at school stuff. I know I paid attention in class. I briefed all my cases. I don't need to go back through and summarize what I learned last year. I just need to take the exam. And they're focusing on the skills piece. And so what they may be missing there are some of those finer points that get tested. And we talked about, what are the subjects that are tested? What are the things that are fair game? And you want to remember, very rarely are they going to give you something that is clear, black and white, boom, this is what happened, right? If I wanted to test you on murder, I could make that super easy, right? Defendant walks in, shoots victim, leaves. Is heard to say beforehand, I hate that guy and I wish he was dead. Like, okay, that's pretty easy. They're not going to do that. They're going to focus on the exceptions. They're going to focus on the exceptions to the exceptions. Like, what if the defendant is a battered wife who is now claiming self-defense? And so you, as the examinee, then have to move from this overarching rule of murder to the defense to that of self-defense, to the sort of permutation of self-defense that might apply to battered women. And that requires you to talk about, what does it mean to be in fear of an imminent threat, right? What does that look like? What about proportional force? And so as you're thinking about developing the skills, and I don't want you to say, well, I know the big rules, I'm good to go. Don't be that person. You really need to make sure you know the rules and the exceptions and the exceptions to the exceptions. The third thing that will sometimes happen is that folks get super busy and they're just not able to dedicate adequate time to prepare. And one of the things that California does that I think is just really wonderful with allowing folks from California accredited or unaccredited law schools to take the exam, there are significant advantages to studying at one of these schools. One of the primary ones is that they're really designed for folks who, can't be full-time students, right? So they're designed for folks who have jobs and families. They're taught by practitioners in the field, judges, lawyers who are prominent in the community, who are also working professionals and are, teaching in the afternoons or evenings. And so a lot of the folks who are preparing for the first year law students exam, the baby bar, are folks who have come to bar prep from that perspective of, I am a working professional who is going to law school with an eye to practicing. but I can't make this my whole life. And so one of the things that BarMax does that I really like is to kind of focus on giving you just the minimum of what you absolutely have to know in order to be successful. So while we're talking about, you need to know like the exception to the exception, you don't need to know every exception to every exception. It's the same folks. They've been writing this exam for a million years. They test the same things over and over again. We know, like I could write your crim question for you right now. Some people are going to agree to do something. It's going to be a felony. Someone's going to die during the course of it. So you don't necessarily have to know, it is involuntary intoxication a defense to whatever. I mean, you should know that, but that's not essential. So one of the things that BarMax is going to do is going to try to make sure that you have the essentials. You have the amount that you have to have in order to be successful on the bar exam. So why do people fail, or why do they struggle with it? They don't prepare adequately, or they prepare by looking at the wrong things. So I want you all who are here to think about making sure you carve out time and you have a good study schedule that's going to allow you to be successful. And we're going to give you a calendar that you can use. We've done some webinars on how to individualize the study schedule if that's useful for you. So that's also something that you may want to look at. But it's the idea that you want to make sure you've put the time aside to prepare. And I want you to make sure that you're focusing on both the memorization, but also the skills aspect of it. So the first thing that I would say is you're going to continue to use IRAC. And again, I think one thing that most of the law schools do really well is to make sure that folks have been exposed to IRAC and have begun using IRAC before they get to the exam. So IRAC is, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. Or you may hear that A instead of analysis, maybe it's been called application. But it's basically the idea that you're going to discuss how the rule plays out in light of these specific facts. So what are you going to do? Well, the first thing that I want you to do is to memorize. And that memorization can be both through your whatever method you normally use, right? So I have shared that I am a big fan of flashcards. So we have some flashcards that you can use. They're like the electronic flashcards. You can also just old-fashioned 3x5 index cards, write out the rules you need to memorize. I also am one of those people where I will post notes to myself, particularly on my mirror, and I'm just like brushing my teeth and looking at the note. And what are you memorizing? Well, you're memorizing your rules. Again, what I see folks sometimes do, and these, like, look, you didn't go to law school because you're not at the top of your class, right? Like, we go to law school because we're smart and talented. And so we're generally pretty confident about what we know. And so you go to law school and you think to yourself, like, okay, I basically know what a battery is, right? Battery, well, it's like that case where he touched the other guy and it was offensive. And so that was sufficient. That's true. But if you're trying to write that on the exam, it's going to take you a ton of time. I want you to be at a place where you're like, battery is the intentional causing of harmful or offensive contact with the person of another. And I want it to be that automatic. I also want you to be thinking about how you're going to give back that information. So a moment ago, I used the example of what if the defendant is a battered wife who's claiming self-defense? And I said, okay, then in that case, you have to start with the big rule of murder and then go to the exception to the big rule, self-defense, and then go into the element of self-defense of imminent harm, and then move into, hey, there's this whole piece about battered woman syndrome and like, what does it mean to have imminent harm and all of that. So you need to have pre-considered how you will convey back that information. So for some folks, that's a flowchart. So I love flowcharts. I use flowcharts. That's what I tend to be. For other folks, they can actually just take that outline that they're studying from, and that's how they're going to do it. Some folks use roadmaps, so-called roadmaps. Those are fine too. All it really is that you have a system of kind of going through and going, oh, okay, murder, it's murder. And oh, it's defense, it's self-defense, but it's this permutation of self-defense. And this is the order I'm going to talk about it. So sometimes what I see from folks is the knowledge is there, but the thought about the order that they're going to discuss it is not. The next thing that I want you to do, and Celeste actually did a great webinar about this recently, is using what we would call like the open book study method. And sometimes people are very shocked to hear that. Wait, you want me to study with my book open? Yes. And I want you to do that for a few reasons. Well, actually, wait. First, let me tell you why I want you to do that. No, how I want you to do that. There we go. Then I'll tell you why. So how do I want you to do that? So you're answering a multiple choice question and you read it and you think to yourself, gosh, this is one of those questions about battery and this person wasn't harmed. And I can't remember if that's enough to be a cause of action. Okay, I want you to go look up the rule, right? Go look up the rule. And I want you to sort of test yourself, acquire the knowledge right away. I want you to do those questions untimed. I want you to check your answer right away. And there's tons of information about the fact that immediately knowing, did you get it right or wrong, is important in terms of learning something, right? So one of my hobbies is, excuse me, fostering kittens. And so I have a litter of kittens with me these days. And they are at the stage that some folks call the bumper car kittens, where their tiny little tails stick up and they kind of toddle around, right? And so they're learning all about the world around them. And, you know, look, they take a step and they slip and they have to reposition themselves and take another step. That works because they have that immediate feedback of, okay, I slipped. Same thing with human babies, right? They reach the toddler stage and they pull themselves up and they try to take a step and they fall and they learn, hey, that didn't work. Or they try to take a step and they're successful and they learn that did work. We don't tell the baby, hey, practice 10 steps and then we'll give you, we'll go back and review them and you'll see if they worked or not. So that immediate feedback is going to be essential. And you want to remember, especially in the beginning, we're not testing you in the sense of trying to know if you know the material. We know you don't know the material. We're telling you memorize and, practice what you're learning at the same time. So we know you don't have it memorized yet. You're doing these things concurrently. But we want you to test yourself first. It is an excellent way to memorize. And I know Celeste has heard me tell this story a million times, but I just think it's so fascinating. But one of the earliest experiments that they ever did in educational psychology was to take this group of child laborers. And they split the group into two, and they taught both groups a poem. And one group, kind of went right back to the factory. And the other group, they quizzed about the poem afterwards. And then they returned a week later and nobody studied. They either had the poem plus some questions about the poem or the poem. And they came back and they asked the kids more questions. And what they discovered was the group that had been quizzed immediately afterward had significantly more retention than those that did not. And that particular bit of information has continued to be accurate from throughout the years, right? So it's one of these very early experiments, but it continues to be replicated. So when we're asking you to do this open book study method and test yourself untimed, look up the answers, all that, we know you don't have it memorized yet. You're working on memorizing it, and testing yourself is one of the ways you're doing that. We're also asking you to use this study method because, as we said, it's the same guys. They've been writing this exam for a million years. They're going to test it the same way over and over again. And so one of the things we want is for you to have done enough of these questions that you kind of know what they look like and how they sound. And so when we're asking you to do this question, we're saying, hey, even if you don't necessarily know the law, we want you to get a sense of how is the law tested. And the only way that you can do that is by doing as many of these questions as possible. The last reason that we want you to do that is for you to get a sense of what you do and don't know. So, and this is why actually taking the question or actually writing it out is important. So I will share with you, when I was preparing during law school, I was definitely one of those people who would read the, question, yeah, okay, and imagine what I would say. And then I would check the answer and I would be like, oh yeah, I totally would have said that. Friends, I did not actually say it that way. And so the only way to know that is by testing yourself and saying, okay, can I actually convey this back in a way that's going to get me a reward? Now, all of this is not to say that, we're not ever going to worry about timing, or we're never going to worry about what I would call exam-like conditions. Just that practice has to be part of your preparation, where that practice looks more like study than it does like testing. Later on, I will want you to work on your timing and your exam-like, work on it under exam-like conditions, but that doesn't need to be the beginning. So later, before the exam, I do want you to make sure that you're practicing under exam-like conditions. What do I mean by that? So that is your closed book scenario. That is your timed conditions, all of that. Sometimes folks will ask me, Jen, do you think I should read through all of the questions first and just get a sense of what they are and then go back and answer them? I would say no. So here's the thing. You've got 4 hours, 4 essays. You got to get them all done. It's not like you can pick the 3 you like best. You have to do all 4. And even if you only take, 2 minutes an essay to read those 4 essays and decide which one you want to do first, you've now cost yourself 8 minutes, right? So I would say just do them in the order that they're presented. And I want you to get in the habit of that. And it's about timing, right? Making sure you can have the conversation that you want to have using the facts and the law in that hour. But it's also about stamina, because it is one thing to do an hour-long essay. It is another thing to do 4 hour-long essays back to back. And so making sure that you kind of put yourself under exam-like conditions where you're developing your timing and your stamina, developing both of those. Okay, there we go. So, whoops, there we go. Okay, and then I want to talk a little bit about BarMax and what we offer in terms of bar prep. And the slides that I have mentioned bar prep, but I want to emphasize we also have a first-year law students exam program that focuses on the 3 subjects that are tested. Again, very similar to what we're going to offer for bar prep, because the reason the bar examiners created this exam was to make sure that you were prepared for the big bar when it rolls around. So what do I want you to know? So we do have these comprehensive courses that include the UBE, which don't worry about that, but California stuff, the MBE questions. As we mentioned, we don't have California written MBE questions simply because California doesn't release them. But we do know that California uses the MBE questions that are released by the national conference. And so what we've done is gone straight to the source, and those are available to you to practice with. We also have bar tutors for both the big bar and the baby bar. So, if you're hearing all this and it feels kind of overwhelming, or, yeah, you could watch a webinar, but you did watch the webinar, but you still have questions, you are welcome to find some time and meet with us. I'm happy to meet with you. Celeste is happy to meet with you. We have a number of tutors that can work with you. And we do everything from, hey, let's talk about this essay question that we did, to let's meet regularly and review substance. So that's also available. And then we have a number of different testimonials that are useful maybe to look at and think about from the different bar exams. And you can see we have folks from California accredited schools here giving their testimonials. So all of this is available. You can actually go to our webpage and see it. If you go to our YouTube channel, where you can find, for example, the webinar on the open book study method. There are also on that YouTube channel testimonials from applicants who've used BarMax to successfully prepare for the bar exam. Okay, so I promised I would try to keep my little summary brief and then open it up to some questions. So that's what I want to do now. I want to turn this over and allow you all to ask any questions you may have. You can use the little Q&A box that's in the middle of the green and, I don't know what you would call that, dark gray and lighter gray screen there. Oh, we have a question. Okay. The question is, do you have webinars for bar prep? And the answer is yes. So if you, oh, there we go. So, and Celeste has answered that question. She says, see, this is the thing. We'll both answer it. She says, yes, we've got a bunch of different bar prep webinars. You can see those on the YouTube channel, super easy. We also do office hours for folks who have signed up for BarMax that are available. And those will be, sometimes it's skills, sometimes it's actual substantive content. I would say Celeste is our MBE expert. And so she did, I think it was an office hour a few months ago on the different common questions that you see in the MBE and different substance areas, and how do you prepare for those pieces. We also have the audio lectures and outlines that you can review, and all of the released baby bar essay questions are available through our website. You can also go to the California Bar Exam website and find them there, but I find it a little bit easier to navigate through our site. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and then Grace had said, how do I access the office hours? And Celeste answers, you can watch the released ones under the clock icon. So if you look on the left-hand side, there's like a little clock that it's a circle with the hands or whatever, and you can click on that and open it up. Okay. And then Jacob says, oh, great question, Jacob. I love this. When the essay prompt says discuss, are they basically just asking for defenses and application? Or are you always supposed to mention defenses if it doesn't say defenses? I love that question. And I will say, in general, I would want you to let the facts be your guide. So, if you're reading the facts, and let's go back to our example of the woman who shoots her, oh, I apologize, guys. Celeste is pointing out that the slide that I showed you about the tutoring was outdated. So be sure to use the link that Celeste is mentioning there rather than the slide that I showed you. So let's say that it's our question of the woman who shoots her abusive husband, and she claim, it doesn't say she's going to claim self-defense, but it tells you oh, he beat her and sent her to the hospital. And then when he was released, she tried to get a restraining order, but the court said no. And so then she got a gun and then she shot him. And then the call of the question is discuss. So you need to make sure that all of those facts find a home. So if there are facts that would give you the ability to discuss those defenses, I want you to do that. So in that scenario where there are facts that drive us to discuss a defense, you need to make sure you're discussing the defense too. So the short answer, Jacob, is just look, if it says discuss, but the facts allow you to talk about something else, you need to make sure you're doing that. And sometimes you'll hear advice like make sure you're using all the facts or find a home for all the facts. That's really accurate. You want to make sure you're doing both of that. Olaf says, what do you recommend to get started with outlining? That's a great question. I love that. So I would say, is presuming you're using BarMax, you can start with I guess any prep company that you're using would probably have the outlines, but I would start with those and kind of see, does that structure work for you? Then I would do, and let's say you've got open the section on products liability. Then I want you to actually write a question on products liability. And you've got your book next to you and you've got your products liability question and you're comparing. And you're seeing if that the way that you're trying to answer the question flows with the way that the structure of the outline is. And you may need to change your outline. You may say, hey, actually, I didn't want to start with negligence. I wanted to start with strict liability and then only move to negligence afterwards. Okay, you can edit that outline to reflect how you're actually going to use that information. And you can obviously use the prepared outline. Plenty of people do. Others find it more useful to create their own. And if you are a create your own person, there's no better way to do that than to take the outline, use it to answer some questions, and then see if it's working for you or not. So great question, Olaf. Ada says that they haven't posted the November 2020 selected answers. So what I will say is it does take them a while to get those selected answers up. It does take them a while to do their grading. So my guess is that they will likely post once they've been able to do the grading and all that. So you may not see those selected answers until the results are released. So just a heads up. But certainly you can reach out to the bar examiners, and I will say coming from Nevada, the California bar examiners are remarkably responsive. So don't be afraid to reach out to them if you have questions. Okay. Katrina says, when writing your essay response, such as for a contract offer, would you incorporate the element in the response, such as stating the facts and then say identity of the parties, listing the contract price and stating price, all within the response? That is a great question, Katrina. So, and I will share with you that I really struggled. Like people would talk about like, oh, you're too conclusory. Okay, like what even does that mean? Like your too conclusory is conclusory. Like what even does that mean? So the answer is the way that you avoid being conclusory is to make sure that you are showing the connection between law and fact. So you can almost think of it as those matching exercises that you did in second or third grade, where you like circle one and then you draw the line to the other and you circle that and like, oh, this, that's what this is. Or you can think of it like a math problem where it's like this fact plus this law leads to this result. And so you can do that either by saying, these facts show the identity of the parties. These facts show price, or you could do it the other way. You could say price, the element of set price is met here because facts. So either way is fine, as long as the sentences that follow your rule statement have both facts and law within them. So order isn't so much as important as the connection is. Sometimes if it's super, super clear, you can say something like, Fred, parenthesis, party one, told Tom, parenthesis, party two, that the car, good, would be for sale for $250 price. Thus, all of the elements, of an offer were met or whatever. So order is not important, but making sure you make the connection between the facts and the law is essential. Jeanette says, where would one find the exceptions to the exceptions for the rules? So you'll find them in the outlines, but you're also it's hard, I think, at least, to really see how they look in real life until you've actually practiced with it. So, it's one thing to think about like, an assignment is permissible unless it would violate public policy. Okay. But once you've actually seen a question where that's raised, it's difficult to really predict it, right? So yes, it's there, it's in the outline, but it's hard to implement until you've actually practiced with it. So I would say, yes, the exceptions to the exceptions are in the outline, but make sure you're also practicing so that you can see how they show up on the bar exam itself. Ooh, another good question from Jeanette. How accurate / effective are the NCBE MBE questions on BarMax for the first year law students exam preparation if California does not publish the previous exams? So great question. Here's what we know. We know that California derives its questions from the national conference's questions. So we're just going to go to the national conference questions. And those are the questions that we know are driving the bus, so to speak, that the California bar is riding on. So we're just going to go straight to those MBE questions, and we're going to encourage you to practice with those. And what you'll see most of the California law schools do is they will actually have their students practice with MBE questions, whether those are released MBE questions or MBE style questions. And so it's not just us that feels like these MBE questions are the best way to practice. Most law schools are doing either the same thing or something very similar with their students as well. Look, if California released its questions, we would absolutely be buying those questions and throwing them in the mix too. And we do have all the essay questions, but we know the California bar is going to use the same questions or question style that the national conference uses. Those are actual released questions. Let's practice with those. Ada is reiterating that she would encourage folks to call the bar office related to receiving additional answers or whatnot. Guys, I have like zero pull with the state bar. But like I said, they do generally answer the phone. They are generally fairly responsive to email. So certainly reach out to them, express your concerns, and hopefully they'll be able to address that. Will we be offering more webinars for the first year law students exam prior to June 21st on essay tips or MBEs like you do for the actual bar? That is a really interesting question. I don't know that we have done a lot specifically for the first year law students exam, but we certainly could. I think what I'm hearing is that you would like us to, and we could totally do that. In the interim, if you're thinking, gosh, Jen, what can I do now to be prepared for the first year law students exam in June? Like, what should I do at this moment? Feel free to go take a look at some of those other questions and webinars and office hours and all that, and see what we've done. The only thing that you wouldn't need to worry about would be the performance test. You won't need to think about that until you get to the big bar exam. And you don't need to worry about topics that are not tested on the baby bar. So I mentioned Celeste is kind of our MBE guru, and she did some great webinars before the last bar exam about how to, or I guess office hours, on how to see common trends in different subjects. And so she did one on Civ Pro. You guys aren't going to have Civ Pro there. I wouldn't worry about that piece, but you definitely could piggyback on some of the other subjects and work with those. So we certainly can do more for the first year law students exam specifically. And in the meantime, while we're putting all that together and developing it, feel free to look at what we've done for the California bar to help you prepare. Oops, any other questions? Oh, interesting question here about do we have any idea why the success rate is so low? So that's a really interesting question. And I will say that while I was doing some research for this webinar, I found a lawsuit that was filed by an applicant who was seeking greater transparency in the grading. Don't know what the outcome of that is/will be, but it was interesting to me that was something. So, somebody had actually sued the state bar to see if they could get greater transparency around grading. And when we talk about the low success rate, so I've seen, again, when I was doing some research for today's seminar, the state bar publishes some data that suggests the pass rate is the last two exams was something like 33%, and the exam, I've also seen a pass rate in the 20s in other sources, and so it is a very low pass rate. However, if you look at what the state bar calls their minimum pass rate over 5 years, the pass rate actually for the baby bar actually rivals what you would see for ABA accredited law schools California pass rate. But it does require folks to continue to take the exam over that 5-year reporting period. So I think what's hard is that it's not so much that people are not successful in their attempts to pass the exam, they're simply not successful on the first attempt. And so when we look at that pass rate and we're looking at, this group that's taken it in the first time, the pass rate's sort of deflated compared to what the pass rate will be as those folks continue to take the exam. And that tells me that there's a problem for those folks either in not having the knowledge, right? Like needing to spend more time with the material and that they just did that over iterations, or failing to practice enough, right? And so their practice is actually when they're going in and taking that exam. Well, let's circumvent that whole thing. Let's get you to be successful on the first attempt. And that means, it's all about that process of memorizing and practicing that we talked about previously, right? This piece of it. Okay, and then let's see. For essays, how accurate should the rule statement be in light of time constraints, and can you pass without spotting all the issues? Oh, I love this question, you guys. This is amazing. This is such a good question. So part of the memorization is I want you to pre-think that rule statement, and I want you to get it as accurate as you can before you actually sit down for the bar exam, right? A gentleman that I used to work with used to say, look, he wanted rules memorized to the extent that, like, if you were shaken awake at 3 a.m. and somebody said, what's an offer? You could say an offer is made in such specific and definite terms that invites the offeree to conclude his or her acceptance is all that's needed to complete the bargain, right? That memorized. Now, that being said, you're human. You're not going to be able to do that for all the rules. And we actually do have a session on um, um, how to make up a rule if you have to. And so that's also something that you could look at. And maybe we can do something like that specifically to the baby bar. And can you pass without spotting all the issues? So or actually, let me just summarize my statement about the rules. So I want your rule statement to be as accurate as possible, but it doesn't have to be perfect. The idea here is, can you basically see that there's a question, and can you, address it? And if it's not 100%, that's okay. Although it's going to save time and you're going to be in a better sort of like headspace if you know that it's situated before you try to answer it. And can you pass without spotting all of the issues? So here's the thing. I don't want you, it would be unlikely that you could answer all of the issues or treat all of the issues the same. They're not the same. Some issues are bigger issues that are worth more points than other issues, and you need to really focus on those big point getters over the small issues. That said, you need to be at a place where you can spot them, and you are deliberately saying, this is an issue where I need to dedicate some time. This issue just gets a sentence or two. So can you pass without addressing every issue thoroughly? Absolutely. Can you pass if you're not spotting all the issues? That would be hard. That would be difficult. The pass rate has been as low as less than 20%. My June 2020 pass score, MBE score, was 80%, and the total with essays was greater than passing. But then the bar multiplied scores with a factor, and that lowered it. How does that work? So another really good question. And the answer to that is it's essentially the same as scaling. And the bar actually does a great job of explaining scaling on their webpage. And so you can, if you go to the California Bar Exam webpage and you look at their section on scaling, and they do a really good job of explaining it. But essentially, what that would mean, right, would be that factor is saying that, it looks like this June 2020 exam was easier than previous exams. And we don't want that. We want them all to be the same amount of difficulty. So through the magic of statistics, we're going to apply this factor that will then scale. So it's not the same as curving. Curving is like, so many people are going to get an A, so many people are going to get an A minus, so many people are going to get a B plus, so many people are going to get a B, so many people are going to get a B minus, and it's supposed to make that bell curve. Scaling is supposed to say, look, a score of 50 in June 2020 should be the same as a score of 50 in June 2008, should be the same as a 50 on a February 2017, like not February, but November 2017 or whatever. The idea is it should hold steady, and so they use psychometricians and scale, which is the same thing that they will do on the actual bar exam as well. What I can tell you is, if you were above passing prior to the scaling, you clearly have the ability, and you're going to be one of those folks where, if you'll stay patient with it and do it again, you're very likely to be successful. So this person says, thanks for the advice on the big and small issues. Is there an easy way of identifying what needs a small paragraph and what needs a longer paragraph? And the answer is just going to be the number of facts that issue gets. So the more time that they have spent developing that issue, the more time you should spend answering it. I would also look at, in addition to kind of like how many facts did they use to develop this issue, ask yourself, how many times has this been tested in the past, right? We've all had that professor who's like, I love talking about inchoate offenses. And great. That's apparently a pet, concern of that professor. The bar examiners are the same way. So when you go back and you see, like, wow, almost every single crim question involves felony murder, when you see that fact pattern that raises felony murder, and particularly if it has a ton of facts, you should be spending more time on it versus something that's, newer. Yeah, Ada says that she's also seen the 80% failure rate, and it's nowhere near the MBE. Yeah, so MBE tends to be similar questions, different pass rates. Okay, I'm not seeing any other question. Oh, no, here's one more. Oh, Binda says, appreciate your advice. You're very welcome. I appreciate you asking a question. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So we can call that a wrap if you guys don't have any other concerns, but I'm also happy to take more questions if you have them. All right. Seeing no more questions and seeing some folks leave, I'm going to call it a day. If you have other questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. Actually, Renee says, can we contact you if you have questions later? Absolutely. Please don't hesitate. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And we wish you the best of luck. And Celeste and I will need to think about adding an office hour specific to the first year law students exam. So thanks for that suggestion. Renee says, what's the best way to reach us? So if you have questions about like the product, like how to use the product, actually, you know what? I'm going to ask Katie to jump in and maybe you can give the links or whatever, Katie, and explain like the best ways to reach folks in the chat. Oops. Okay, guys, and I just want to highlight, if you check the chat box, you can see that Katie is providing the various emails that you can use to reach us. So, there's the BarMax email and then also the support, like if you're having trouble with the tech aspect of it. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you again for your time and for attending today. And please do reach out. Katie's given the emails and the phone numbers and all that to us. If you have questions or concerns, we're happy to talk with you. And hopefully we will see you all at an office hour in the future. Okay, bye.